Hi, Atarah.
Hi.
Atarah. So, quick bit of background for anyone who's on. Atarah and I met in, I think it was like 2007 in New York, backstage at a Björk show.
Yep.
I seem to remember. And then, as now, and as ever, you cut like a very striking figure. I think at the time you were only wearing black.
hmm
Um, you knew how to like rock the monochrome. But we got put in touch through. I think you were there with someone who used to work in Björk's A&R team in the States a long time ago, and we got put in touch to start talking about working on music together. So all of which is to say, Atarah and I go like a really, really long way back. As you can see, we're still in touch. But I think let's just zoom right to the present, which is that last week your single "Modern Love" came out. And when I was doing the kind of like typing out my announcements and build up to this, it's like, well, this all sounds so simple on paper. It's like you
Yeah.
have a single that you put out independently. But I think what the people we've been talking to on this channel will like really benefit from in talking to you is that the path that you've gone through to get to this point is super epic.
Yeah, it's very intense, like to the point that I'm actually surprised I'm still a musician, to be honest.
Oh,
Like,
really?
well, only because for me, I'm a very tenacious person and I'm very resilient. If I was anybody else, I would have like threw in the towel like when I lost my record deal, like as a lot of people do. And like I went through so many cycles, like publishing deal offered, removed, back on the table, not happening, manager, think it's the right person, falls off the face of the earth. Like it's just that was kind of the whole pattern I experienced through my career, but for some reason I was like, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I have to
Right.
fight to be able to continue to do this, you know?
Is there like a kind of an overview, cliff notes that you'd like to give everyone just so they can kind of like get a sense of the whole path you've been on?
Yeah, I think kind of the story is when I'm gonna nutshell to give like a little context. I grew up with music because my dad was a musician, but he didn't do it professionally. He actually stopped playing music, and then the people he was playing in a band with went on to be in Skid Row.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
yeah, so he always had, this dream of being a musician and put a guitar in my hand at a very young age. But I was too shy to play in front of people, and wasn't really taught anything. I was just given a guitar. So I never performed in front of people, but like I started secretly writing songs, when I was like 7 years old, and just continued. And I I never thought I could be a musician because I'd received programming my whole life, like you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than getting a record deal. And you have, just like the typical things you hear in the suburbs when you have a dream that is beyond what people are aware of normally. So I didn't go to school for music. I went to school for design because I didn't think I'd ever be able to be a musician. And then when I was in school, I had like a total nervous breakdown. And I started performing, but like as a mess, because I was in such a strange point in my life that I kind of really didn't know who I was, which is kind of the thread through my whole career too. I always knew who I was and what I had to offer, but I was never able to physically find myself like that and like what I look like everything. It's almost like I would like research what I was supposed to be and then like be that, because I had been like, this was my role with my friends, this was my role in my family, so on and so forth. And then when I moved to go to school, it was just me. And I was like, who the fuck am I? And I like had a nervous breakdown. I like shaved my head and shaved off my eyebrows and then hated it. And I bought a fucking wig and wore a wig like under a hat. Like I had a total meltdown, and I started making music again. and a friend of mine, actually, who was an opera singer, sorry, had to like hold my hand the first time that I performed because I was like crying. I was just so shy. And then that turned to me moving back to New York, and I started a cello rock band and got signed to Atlantic Records, like literally.
I want to just like clip that one sentence because even just like that in and of itself is like such a you'd never really hear that. I started a cello rock band and got signed to Atlantic Records.
No, and it's so funny because sometimes throughout my career when I've thought things were impossible, I was like, you had a fucking cello rock band and you got signed to like Atlantic Records proper, right? And so it's like a friendly reminder to myself. But and then in that process, because similarly, like to everything else that had happened, I identified like as a band because I didn't have enough confidence in myself to be a solo artist, even though I was doing every single part of it, you know, like including like paying for people's cabs, even though I made like $200 a week for them to like get to the show and stuff. And so when I got my deal, I was just like, I saw people starting to get very greedy who were around me. So I was like, I'm going to do something completely different, and I'm going to take ownership over my career and over my life, and I'm just going to be a solo artist. And in that process is when I met you, and it's just which was so interesting because it was just so surreal, right? Like I was like a kid from New Jersey, and then I was like backstage at like, I think it was Madison Square Garden that I met you. Yeah. And it was, just like this, like such a surreal moment. And
quick aside, like I'm like a kid from basically New Zealand, like the South Island of New Zealand. So it's like, I think we were like probably bonded over both being like, this is all really surreal kind of thing.
Secretly like, why are we here? Like, how do we get here? But yeah, and it's interesting. So that project, I basically my A&R got fired and wanted to manage me and didn't want me to stay at the label. So I actually had to fight to get out of my contract, right? Wow. So, and they were either going to pay me off or I could own my record. So I fought to own my master. So I left with like no money, but like that record that we made is mine, and I want to like put it out one day when people like actually like want to hear the process, right? So, but what's funny is it's the most personal record I ever wrote, and I just thought it was so special. And like even the whole energy behind it, strangely, is where I've come back to now, but with like a much more in-depth story, right? And a much bigger understanding of myself. Because I think when I first met you, I wasn't even comfortable like talking to people.
Yeah, so I'm, like when I go back to that first meeting, I seem to like, I kind of mentioned you're all in black, and it was almost like my first impression of you was like, Atarah's like this super mysterious character. But then like as soon as we actually hung out, it's just like Atarah's just like the warmest, nicest, funniest, most outgoing, relaxed, kind of easy to hang out with person. You know, one of the easiest people I've ever hung out with in my life. You know? So it's funny and I was like, because we're in New York, I assumed that was like fashion.
Yeah, no, it was just like pure, honestly, it was just pure insecurity. And like, I just didn't want to be like looked at, if that makes sense. Like to the point, like I even like, I think at that time, like had an eating disorder. Whoa. Like I was just like, just everything. Like I just didn't want to be seen, to the point like I would physically even shrink myself. We're all black. And then when I was comfortable with somebody, like they'd see this whole other side of me, right? But I was very shaken after that, because like that was basically 6 years of my career that I trusted this person. And just nothing ever moved, and everything was always my fault, even though I would lay out, like I started doing all the stuff I do now then. And he'd be like, oh, you're being pushy, you're being this. And I'm like, it's been 4 years. Like, when am I going to release a song? When am I going to, right? And so I started getting a complex around like everything. And
so we're talking the period after you'd taken your record from Atlantic and you're kind of in a management relationship.
Yeah, because so basically, because the thing is, he's like, because I had met with the president of Atlantic to talk about my record, and it was basically put in front of me like if I was a girl, because at that time that's when like like Adele and Katy Perry and Lady Gaga, like all these people like came right around that time, right? And like they just signed like Licky Lee. Um, and like it was communicated to me that like if I was a girl, like this would be easier to push, but like I'm a guy and like there's no like guy solo artist, right? Who's not like R&B or hip hop or pop. Now it's like slightly different, but I mean even now like Harry Styles is, but he was in One Direction, and so are most people who are established like that. And but it was just like so shattering for me. And my A&R was the one person who I thought really understood me. So I went with him, and I got to the point where I just had to jump off of a cliff and be like, I really love you, but if something doesn't happen, like I need to take this chance for myself and like find myself, because if my career doesn't go anywhere, like I'm going to blame you, and I don't want, and not like in a like shitty way, but
no, I know what you mean. Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? Because
Well,
like he was only my only point of reference to the music industry, you know?
right.
Yeah. So is this way too in depth?
No. I mean, I think this is a really interesting crux of like it's. I mean, effectively, like what you've just told us is like the label recognized creatively what you're doing was great, but just felt like it was like a marketing decision.
Yeah.
And then you kind of went to, okay, so Yanni Panini is saying, no, this is super interesting.
Yeah.
Normally, as you've been on some of these streams, Atarah, it's like I'll talk to people about EQ. So this is like why I wanted you on, was so we could talk about like other aspects. We will talk about that. And just a little spoiler alert. This is what's so heavy duty about what Atarah has done. Is that, we were texting each other recently with like mix notes and talking multiband compression and sidechain compression. But let's keep it at this point in history. So you basically come out of like a deal. You've got a creative product you're super happy with. You've gone off with someone with a plan that you'll independently put out this project you're really happy with, but then 4 years go by.
Yeah. And then 4 years turned to 6 years. And then that's when I had that conversation finally. And yeah, it was really hard, and because I've had to start over in my career so many times, because there was something in me. I think I so desperately just wanted somebody to believe in me, and I really needed to believe in myself, right? And I didn't. Like I knew I was. It's almost like I was a survivalist. Like I knew you could put something in front of me and I could figure it out, make it happen, become good at it, my problems, these people's problems. But I never stopped to appreciate any of the skills that I adopted, or myself for that matter. So I was always like reaching out to someone anytime like a new person would come on my team or someone who was interested. And I think like there's a weird, feeling of desperation that I was putting off that kind of like makes people were originally attracted to like my magnetism, but then when they got close were like, ooh, like you're needy. Like even though they didn't know that I was, you know what I mean? Like I didn't ask for anything, but I think people just picked up on something. And
hang on, can we unpack that a little bit more? So like, let me paraphrase to ensure I'm understanding. You felt in a way that the authorities or the people who would know what was supposed to happen were always external. So anytime someone came in that you could work with, there was something in your energy that you, in a way, wasn't centered or wasn't self-assured, or I'm paraphrasing badly, but I just think that's a really, really interesting point here.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, I mean, I believe now, like, and this is a whole other extension of something else, but we kind of call in the things that we need, even if they feel bad at the time. And I called in so many people who triggered parts of me and triggered insecurities inside of me that made me look at myself. Because what happens is, why would I have like 2 different A&Rs, 3 different managers, all these things, and it's the same thing? They just like one day just like fall off the face of the earth, or and so you have to look at yourself at a certain point and be like, why is this happening? Like, I know I'm a good person, I know I'm good at what I do, and And I think there is this just unspoken pressure of an expectation that I put on people that like they sense to some degree. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, let's carry on with the story and we'll see how this one
Yeah.
unfolds. Yeah.
So, so like I was always good at like calling the right like people in when I needed and also the right opportunities, and I was able to make stuff happen, but I could never sustain anything because like my self-worth was too low, right? So, I started, just like working, producing myself. I met another producer at that time and worked with him for a little bit. Two different people who were very patient with me because like at this point, like I had a very clear view on what I wanted. So I was like, that's not the snare and that's not this. And I would start like really looking over people's shoulders and like absorbing as much information as I can. And and then my publishing deal came through him with Sony. And the producer I was working with at the time was like traveling and vacationing a lot. And I'm like, being told like, oh, well, you're 28 years old. Like you need to like start lying about your age and all stuff like this. And like, so I had all this like insecurity and pressure on top of everything else now, and I was just like, it really fucked me up, to be honest. And so the thing is, it was a good initiative for me to start really taking control over my project. So I sat and I just locked myself away for like months and just listened to so much music and things that I like and dissected them to the point. Like I already had my pub deal at this time, so I was a good songwriter because I mean, I've written thousands and thousands of songs, right? Like if you go through my laptop, it's insane the amount of music that's on there that like probably no one's ever going to hear. To the point, my friend John actually was like, it would be a fucking baller move if like you released your first record and it was like 500 songs. He was like, who else could do that? And I'm
that
like,
would be hilarious.
Like, there's something there, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I just like started listening with different ears. Like, why do I like this snare? What don't I like about this? And then I started just like learning different things. Like, I don't really like close mic drums, right? So like everything I started using would be really roomy, or this is the kind of reverb that I like, or this is when something comes in, this is when something drops out. Like, what makes this interesting? And it was just very cerebral about it. And and then Sony was like, this is actually the best that we've heard from you out of anything that you've played for us. So like it kind of gave me license to continue that. And at that time, I think I had like 200 followers on Instagram or something. And my A&R was like,
what year are we talking at this point, roughly?
This was probably like 4 years ago now.
Okay.
And my A&R was like, you need to like do something about this.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but I'm like, listen, I fucking write everything. I produce everything. I wasn't mixing at that time. I'm like, I do all the graphics. I come up with all the video treatments. It's like, isn't that enough? And she's like, no, it's not, actually. And you need to kind of know how to do everything. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't feel like me. It feels very inauthentic to be like, hey, check this out and blah, blah, blah. Because like, to me, that's what social media was, like an advertisement of who you want people to think you are, you know?
Right.
And so she started showing me like Instagrams of people that she thought were successful with it, and aligned with them. And she's like, you just have to find a way that's like aligned with who you are. And I did that. And I started reaching out to I started following and reaching out to the people that I thought would like what I did, like completely shamelessly. Right. And just like I would follow people, like and comment and this and create relationships. And then it slowly grew and people started sharing stuff and just have been incredibly patient. Like I've shared a lot of my process of recording and songwriting and stuff, but like this is actually the first single that I've like ever released that's an original single in my career, which has been like so long. It's just so crazy.
Kind of wild, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's been really interesting as well, like watching your social media channels, is how busy you have been making music. And that's just in, like you're saying, these last 3-4 years. It's not like, Modern Love is not just like the first song you finished. So, okay, let's put it out.
Yeah.
Can I like backtrack? There's a couple of little questions in there that I have about when you're talking about coming out of a relationship with the producers you were working with. I mean, I remember we had a big catch up around then,
Yeah.
and you sent me a few of your jams, which are like absolute bangers. I hope you don't mind me saying, like, Atarah has a song in his back pocket called "Vacation" that's just like amazing, like total feel good one. But did that kind of like fizzle out due to your producer's other commitments, or was there a point where you just decided like very cleanly, like, I'm going to change the way I'm approaching this? And it's like,
No, just other like from other commitments, and then because I was carrying such a pressure to try and make my career move, which is fucking impossible. Like there are certain things you just can't control, and when we start thinking we can, that's when all the problems happen. Because like life comes to you, it happens around you. You can't like look in one direction and have an expectation and think like, this is what my career path is and this is how it's going to happen. Because like then you're not seeing the full picture ever, and you could be missing like giant opportunities that are coming from different directions, right? And at that time I was trying to like micromanage, control things because I felt so insecure that like I was about to expire. And yeah, and the producer I was working with, I had given him like, I don't know, 30 something songs, and he's amazing. We're really good friends still, but we just had a little period in our friendship because he was kind of doing so many other things and never finishing anything.
yeah.
And then
I've been in that trap as a producer as well. It's like you know, suddenly 6 months goes by.
yeah, and I think like, and I signed a production agreement because that's the thing that was happening at the time. That was more in his favor than mine. Even though I completely trusted him, when I started producing my stuff, he got very uncomfortable, and yeah, like called his lawyer and can he do this and this and this, and then that was a whole thing that almost like stopped me, because I'm like, I just like gave this person like 30 songs that we haven't done anything with. It's been like 2 years, right? But you see, like there's a theme was like I never stood up for myself when it came down to like, because like I thought I always needed somebody in order to do something, right? So it just like insecurity after insecurity, situation after situation, it was the same thread that kept happening. And then the lawyer was like, how many songs has he given you? And he's like 35 or something. He's like, well, you had a contract for 2 albums. Like he's far surpassed that, and now it's your responsibility, like if you want to make money off of this, to like do something. So yeah, so that happened, and then I again like locked myself away because I didn't have money to do anything either. And that's the thing, like that can be hard in the music industry, is like so many people that I know who do advance, like, you know, their dad's on the board of Universal, or their dad's a famous actor, or, you know, their dad started a Spotify playlisting company that now Universal owns, or do you know what, like there's always like some kind of nepotism there in the people that I knew. And then I knew so many people who were so much more talented, who like couldn't get off the ground because like they didn't have the income to do it, to even like promote a post or like pay for mastering, or right. So I kind of hit a wall again because I couldn't afford to have anybody mix it. And I had a friend who was trying to help me, who would get like incredibly frustrated with me because I was producing and I was liking my rough mixes, but then we would get to a mix situation and he would be like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, yeah, but I can. He's like, both of these things can't be loud. And I was like, yeah, but I want both of them to be loud. And they were loud in my rough mix. So if I can make them loud in my rough mix, like you should be able to make them loud in like a better way, you know? But I didn't know what I was doing or talking about. So again, I locked myself away for like 6 months, just mixed the same song over and over and over again in like different sessions, and would, you know, try different compressors and try different EQ and see, you know, just like what I liked. And then if one thing stuck, I would save that, you know, and see what would happen. And then I started like, because I'm this kind of person, I started getting like like analyzers, frequency analyzers. And if I could find stems from a song that I like, I would like put the kick drum up and then look at a frequency analyzer and like take a picture of it when it was hitting to see like what they were boosting or what they were cutting. And I did that for like bass and kick and vocals and backing vocals, and just like really geeked out because I'm not good at learning when people try to teach me. Like I'm good at learning just like watching, like, or understanding somebody's process, right? So even for me, like being able to dissect a choice that somebody already made was an easier way for me to learn, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting way to put it. More than like an active learning with someone there showing you, or I guess you didn't really have access to those resources anyway, or
Yeah, like I never want to disrupt anybody's process, even when I'm working with them. And like my best working relationships, like, I mean, literally the way that I still make drum beats is the way that I watched you do my record, where it was like sample by sample dropped into Pro Tools to like create the beat. Like I picked that up from you, and like I don't use an MPC. I have no interest. I have no interest of using any kind of thing where I'm like, you know, marking the beat, like where the kick is hitting. And like I drop sample by sample because like I watched you do that. It made sense to me. It connected with me. But like, you know what I mean? You weren't like,
but you didn't stop
Atarah,
me and say, "What are you doing right now?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like it's disruptive,
Yeah.
right? And for me, I'm like, oh, this is such a great flow that's working for this person. So I like to like experience what somebody does and then figure out how to incorporate it into how I work, right? Yeah, so that's basically what I did with like everything in my career at this point.
Amazing. And I found it really interesting what you're saying. It wasn't, when you were saying you locked yourself away to mix, I assumed you were going to say you went through all of the songs you recorded and mixed them all differently. But are you saying you like specifically chose one song and just like went from a blank slate over and over and over again?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, like, when I tell you my first session when I was figuring out my first mix had like 15 revisions. And then I was like, okay, like this is fine. And then I would start again and be like, this is the snare thing I like. This is the kick thing I like. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause they're like, and then after I literally had like 15 different sessions of this song, I started understanding like what frequencies I like to hear and what ones bother me, and the volume relationship and where my voice should sit. And do you know what I mean? And how to like make space and create depth. And yeah.
Great. And so it wasn't like you were, I think you're saying you would still revise a certain mix up to a certain point, but then once you hit a certain point, you would like basically like torch it and go back to zero.
Totally.
Rather than trying to retweak, which I mean, I think that's an amazing insight. I haven't really heard anyone specifically talk about that process. Because we do, actually, Monocog, who's on at the moment, we were kind of having a bit of a laugh on Monday about how he'd say if he's been like working on a song for 3 months or something like that, he gets a bit confused at mix stage. But I guess like does doing that process over and over again, and I feel this is like a broadly creative application, not just specifically for mixing, but you're able to kind of like reset your mind, like go back to the beginning of the decision tree and then see how things unfold if you follow a different path.
Yeah, I think like the thing is with anything, even with songwriting, because I used to be very precious about it, like, because how I write, it's like I literally sit at my piano, I start singing nonsense, I sing some words, pop out, and then I go back and I find the lyrics, right? And I used to be like, the first set of lyrics had to be the song. And if it wasn't the song, like, I would scrap the song. I would never revise anything. And then when I sat in a session one day with a bunch of people from Berkeley who went to school for songwriting, and I saw the way that they worked, like I had like a pen and paper, and we started to write lyrics, and they were all on their laptops, like in a semicircle. There were like 3 people, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm writing lyrics." And they're like, "Well, how do you know what to write about?" Because like they needed to have like a whole conversation about like what's the story and this and what are we communicating here and how does that look in the verse and what's it, and like I'd never thought like that, right? But then working with them and like being able to take a bit of that and being like, oh, actually, when you can like go back with a fresh set of ears, you can make better choices, right? That is so Berkeley, whoever just said that. And so and that that's one thing that has really helped me in my career, is realizing that nothing is precious, right? So like with a mix, like it's not even about necessarily listening with fresh ears. It's about understanding that like whatever work you did up to this point gave you a certain understanding of the song. You're familiar with what's there, what parts you're resonating with, what parts you're not. And just because you sat there for, I don't like Modern Love, I mixed, I can't even tell you how many times. And then similarly, like I kept like, I'm like, why do I have like 4 EQs on like this one fucking thing that's irrelevant? Because I'm trying to make it pop, and I'm just, I was just like, this is stupid. And I sat on the plane, and I didn't, because this is very rash, and I do not recommend anybody do this, because it wasn't even backed up. And I'm just like, I was like, fuck this. I'm going to start over. And I deleted every single bus, every single reverb, compressor, EQ, and just started over on the plane. I did all the reductive EQ first for every track. And then I was like, oh, this sounds great. Even when everything was just at the same level, right? And then, and I learned a lot in mixing in that process. And now when I'm going to do all the rest of these songs, I'm going to do the same thing, because it just really worked for me. Like I got to know it, and I was like, okay, this is okay, but it's still not doing what I want. And sometimes I think you have to start fresh, because you can just get so caught up in the amount of work that you put in, to the point that you stop hearing the song, because you don't want the energy that you invested to be wasted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It's there's a term for that kind of thinking, which is the sunk cost fallacy. Have you heard that term?
No.
It's basically like thinking, it can be applied to anything. Like a good example is like if you're starting a business or something like that, and you go like, well, I've put, $10,000 or $50,000 into this business, but it's not generating a profit. It's kind of like ruining your life. You're not getting any sleep. It's not going anywhere, and you have other ideas you'd rather pursue. And you either sit there going like, but I put $50,000 into it, or you go, I need to just start fresh. So it's that kind of whole, I think it's really great that you hit on that point, because I think any creative work that you're doing, the time or effort that you've put in is irrelevant.
Yeah, because it's beneficial, whether it sucks or whether it's great. It's the same benefit, because you're learning, right? Totally. And like you're learning a better way to work, and like a better way to work sometimes is just starting over and taking all the lessons you learned from the mistakes that you have in like your other session, and being like, okay, like I have way too many plugins on everything, or do you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to do that this time. These are the important things. These are the things that I want in the front. These are the things that I'm going to like throw in the back. Not everything needs to be, because what happens is with so many people, especially like when they're learning to mix, they just keep making things brighter, or like putting like 2 to 4K on everything, because they think it's making it pop. And then all of a sudden, just every single source hurts. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's hard to recover from that, because like the amount of fatigue you even get just from like listening to it is crazy, know?
Yeah. And is that like a lesson that you've applied kind of to the whole holistic world of everything you're doing?
Yeah, I think the thing is like, what I realized is like control always comes from insecurity, right? Control is not a positive thing. Like knowing what you're doing and what you are is one thing, but like trying to control situations. I mean, like, this is what my career looks like. This is the path. Like you're setting yourself up to feel rejected, because we don't know the future, right? In like a mix, you can only control so many things. There comes a point where you have decisions that you have to make, and you have to like let a song be what it's going to be. The same thing with writing. Like you can't force things. Like sometimes you just have to accept things as they are, and like make them the best that they could be within that context. Otherwise, like they kind of lose the point of what they were supposed to be originally,
Yeah. And on like the writing side, for anyone who's just come on, we're talking with Atarah. We're talking about like his whole amazing path of basically going from being in situations of like relying on outside sources to fully taking control for every aspect of his career. and really taking the time to deep dive into all these gajillion different areas and kind of like build up skills and strengths and momentum that he can apply holistically. He mentioned before, Atarah, that you were sitting on like, 1,000 songs or something like that.
Yeah.
What was kind of like the decision, or do you have like a kind of decision tree that you follow in terms of choosing where to focus your energy? Because I'm sure even if you're purely focusing on being like a self-produced recording musician, just literally the fact you have so much material must be so overwhelming. And like waking up in the morning going like, do I write a new song? Do I like do some mixing? Do I do some production? Do I write a string arrangement? Do I redo my vocals?
Yeah.
Do I comp the other thing? And that's completely before we get to like all of your kind of audience facing stuff.
Yeah.
Or your design or your creative ideas. Like, how do you actually choose where to focus?
I'm not a believer. I know this works for a lot of people of like forcing anything. So some people are like, I'm going to sit and write a song every day, even if it sucks. Like I'm not that person. Like if I don't feel something, I don't do it. Right. So fortunately, like being completely independent, like I have lots of choices on how I can spend my time. Like I sit and I write when I want to write. I sit and I play my piano, and sometimes I want to be creating music, but I don't feel like writing or I don't feel inspired. So I just sit and I just play the songs that already exist just to like stay connected to them. When I sit to produce something, I usually know in the process of writing the song what it's supposed to sound like very quickly. I mean, like verse, pre-chorus, chorus. It's like a download. This is the vibe. This is the production. And then at that point, I'll get up from my piano and I'll track like a MIDI piano, record a scratch vocal, and start building a track around it. And then sometimes I'll finish the song, like I'll write the second verse lyrics. I'll wait to do the bridge once I'm in production, because I always find it, for me, like writing a bridge with a producer hat on versus writing a bridge as a songwriter, because as a songwriter, sometimes you want the bridge to be like this big thing, right? But in reality, like, you kind of just want the bridge to be like a sharp turn that nobody saw coming, right? So like with Modern Love, it was already this like such a grandiose sounding song. So the bridge, I was like, I literally want like a piano, vocals, and like that's it, right? And then I added some like more like vibey elements, but yeah, I just like go where things pull me basically, and I just like trust my instincts, because that's the thing is I always to like bring things full circle, I always had those instincts. I just didn't trust them, right? Like I could make stuff happen. I could sign to Atlantic. I could be working with someone like you who was like doing stuff that I thought was like the most incredible stuff I ever heard before, and like, but then everything always fell apart because I stopped taking ownership over what was happening, and I handed all the energy around it and responsibility to somebody else, right? And so now I just don't do that at all. I'm like, okay, this I'm feeling, this I'm going to do. I'm going to sit, I'm going to write a song, I'm going to produce it. And if I don't feel that vibe to produce it, then I know it's not good, or it's not for me, because I'm not excited enough to put more time into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, do you notice that like if you're not in a feeling that like you want to produce something, do you trust that it will come back at the right time? And have you like noticed that? Or is it much more like if something doesn't spark a fire for you, then you feel it might not have been worth the effort?
Yeah, if I don't get that initial blast, it doesn't go anywhere.
Okay.
Like, cause it happens, like, I'll be, a lot of songs that are going to be on the record, actually, like I was hiking, and then I would get like and this is literally what happened. I'll pick up my phone, I get an idea, and it happens while I'm sleeping too. Sometimes I leave my phone next to my bed, and I'll wake up and I'll be like, and I have these too. I'm not going to play them now because like so if you imagine I have thousands of songs, I have even more voice notes of just like half finished ideas. But so I'll pick up my phone, I'll be like, a matter of opinion, looking for, right? And then I'll save it. And then literally like 10 seconds later, I'll hear like, Da, 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 da. I'll record that. And then that's kind of how I write a song. Like if I'm not home, and it happens all the time, just all the parts come down. Then I come home, I find the chords. If I'm very excited, I sit down at my laptop immediately. I start programming a beat after I do the vocals and the piano. And yeah, and that's it.
Interesting. So you feel, so it's always kind of like some kind of like extra technological or situational impulse or idea that guides you.
Always.
Amazing.
Yeah, and if it's not there, I don't do it. And like that's a thing because like I can't sit and work. I have so much work to do on every single thing that I do, right? Like writing a song takes a certain amount of time. Producing a song takes a really long time. Mixing the song takes a long time, right? And then I have to figure out like artwork and video ideas and promotion and all these things. So like if I don't love it, like I'm not going to be motivated to do any of those steps, you know? So like I have to really be excited by what's in front of me because I know what comes off of that. And like there is a part of me that does admire people who are like, oh, I need to write a record, and they do, you know, like a writing camp for 2 weeks and then that's their 13 track album. Like and they put it out because like it can just be like that, and they don't get so emotionally attached to things. Like I do think there's a freedom in that. I've never been that because I don't have the luxury of being able to do that, but I think it's actually put me in a great place where like I feel so proud of everything. And because I'm so connected and a part of all of it, the thread is so strong between everything.
Right.
Because I'm not working with 5 different producers and
Yeah.
mixers and, you know, 3 songwriters on every song. Like, yeah.
So it's really kind of, I mean, your music really is a window directly into you and what you're doing and what
who I
you're
am.
feeling and everything.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting with that is now it's the first time in my career that I've ever just supports come from nowhere. Without me even trying. Like this quarantine, as awful as it is, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things happening. Like my partner is like having health issues, like his whole industry he works in shut down. There's like all the stuff that everybody's dealing with and then some added stuff. But personally, like I didn't know this was going to be happening when I picked May 8th to release my single, you know? And I had a lot of people similarly, like from the past testing me, like saying, oh, you shouldn't release music, it's a bad time, and don't do this and don't do this and don't do, and kind of pushing all the buttons that normally would have made me unravel and not put anything out. But I just like, I stuck with my intuition. I'm like, no, this is the best time for me to release music. And I ended up doing this like mental health festival that just was moved to online and happened a few days ago. And like, you know, it was like I did a performance and like Chris Martin did a performance, and like that just like I got a text. That's not how my life looked before. I just sat, got a text saying you should be playing this, and then this organization reached out to me and asked if I would do a partnership with them. That's all in like wellness also, so I'm doing that, and like a couple other things happen. And because I always adopted a character in my music because I thought I had to, right? Oh, I have to like dress a little more extreme because like that's what you do when you're a performer. I have to, I mean, not that I'm like, you know, dressed like a dad right now or something. But like this is, I woke up, this is what I felt like putting on. Like there's no thought behind it, right? And, but my project was always just a piece of who I am. And this batch of songs, and I think why I just feel so excited to put it in the world, is the first time that my like heart and my soul are 100% connected to it, because I did go down this whole journey of like wellness and manifestation. I started doing neuroplasticity work, and there's a company called To Be Magnetic that literally changed my life, and my relationship with myself and just my standards and my self-worth. And it so seamlessly came to me what this project is supposed to be and how it's so much bigger than just songs, right? And another person trying to like blow up on Spotify or blow up on SoundCloud, and I've been very supported in that. And like I'm using like solfeggio tones, like healing frequencies in some of the songs, to to just like give them even more healing properties in addition to like the content that it's talking about, dealing with like mental health and my struggle through that, which is what the whole record is about, is my journey from kind of the darkest place to the resolution. And yeah, so it's just been amazing so far.
And are you like, so you basically just like revealed you're pretty much sitting on your album at this point? Are you still like needing to do a ton of work to finish it off, or is it?
No, it's written, it's produced. I have like little odds and ends on songs. I've become like a better mixer. Also, like, thank you. Damian was so patient with me during my final mix process, and like listening and like throwing ideas my way. And it really made me, I mean, to be honest, like at first, like the reason I deleted everything on the plane was because you were like, oh, cut these, you know, there's some like whistle frequencies, like you should just like do a sweep. And then I started doing it on the master, and I was like, this feels fucking lazy. Like, I need to go into every single track and do this, right? And at first I was like, fuck. But it ended up like completely, and that's what I was saying. Then when I did the playback, I was like, oh, like actually all of these sources are really strong when I just remove these like kind of annoying frequencies. And there's not actually that much for me to do here, right?
Yeah, I think I remember like saying like do that and then see how it feels or see where it leads you, because you'll probably hear it differently or something.
Yeah. And so I have to go in and do that now. I already went in, took everything off all of the songs, did all the reductive EQ for all the songs, and now I'm just going to go in and do like the final things as I'm releasing the singles, because I'm releasing it independently. Like, one, I can't afford to just like, you know, pay a few grand to have like an album mastered. I don't have the funds to like deal with like playlisting and all, like distribution, all of that stuff also as like a huge collection. But and I think that's part of the thing that I learned through this process too, that I think is very important for musicians, whether they're independent or not, is I think we spend a lot of time overwhelming ourselves. Like even talking about like, oh, now I have to pay for the mastering and I have to pay for this, and what is this, and what's the layout, and how am I going to do this, and I can't afford a PR person, and I can't afford this, and to the point that it becomes like paralyzing, right? So I said to myself, like, that was such a block for me. So I'm being so patient. Like I released my song, like my second one isn't mixed yet. And as soon as like it is, like I'll put it out and then I'll release another one. And I'm just going to keep releasing singles until it feels absurd, you know, and I'll be like, here's the rest of the album with like 3 more tracks, you know?
Right.
Because then I'm trying to build my Spotify also, because I never had music to really promote. On Spotify, if you submit a record, you only get to highlight one song for them to listen to. So it's more beneficial, and for me to like give myself the visibility of releasing like 7 or 8 things before my album, so I can keep, you know, I had a weird, like you saw like the hockey stick of my followers. Like, you know, I started with like 200 followers like a few weeks ago on Spotify, and now I'm like at almost 900, like from releasing one song, right? So if
one song, incidentally, like 5 days ago.
5 days ago, right? So it's like, so if I can continue building, like for me, anything's a success as long as, period. If you get to the point where you put it out there, but like when you can create even like micro growth for people who are actually listening and actually care, it's successful in my eyes. Like, yes, would it have been great to have released it and been on like 5 Spotify playlists, like official ones, and like have a million streams right now? Yeah, of course. Like, I'm not going to poo-poo that, but like that hasn't happened yet. So, do you know what I mean?
But you've made a kind of very deliberate choice. I'm kind of fascinated about this because I'm relaunching a label and actually have something booked in for release at next month. But it's like, have you kind of consciously chosen you're not worrying about hiring external PR or playlist pushing?
The thing is, I can't. Like, I don't have the money to do that right now, right? So, I mean, there are like, what's her name? Andrea Baker, who does like High Rise, who's like crushing it. I met with her actually when I was with Atlantic about like working on our record. And now she does like Billie Eilish and, you know, Phineas and all these people like that. But, you know, but like those companies charge like $5,000 a month. Like, I can't afford that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like, but what I can do is, BMI has been really good to me. So I'm going to do like a session with them and they're doing a write up and just like all this wellness stuff's really helping. And now there's stuff I can't say in detail, but like there's an aspect connected to wellness that's come in that is going to be providing like a substantial amount of money. So like I will be able to, moving forward, slowly have those things for myself, right? But like for this release I didn't. So it's just, how can I make this the most effective that it could be within my means, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's fascinating because when was it a couple of years ago, we reconnected and had lunch and you were telling me about what was going on with your socials.
Yeah.
And instantly for people watching, like I have a running joke with Atarah that he's my socials guru because he kept trying to explain like, look, this is how you should look at it. I feel like I was always looking at social media with kind of like a slightly grumpy 90s British audio engineer brain. Do you know what I mean? Like everything's supposed to be private. Everything's supposed to be mysterious. And just speaking for me personally, even doing this Twitch stream was kind of like a big challenge to myself of like, well, let's just throw open the doors and we'll just share everything. And that just sounds like a lot more fun. But point being is that you have, leading up to the release of this, you just decided to just be authentically yourself and share yourself, and the people who want to know about that have hung around and brought more people. And so it makes perfect sense to apply that with your music.
Yeah, because like, what else can you be, right? Like that's the thing. Like, I wasn't that for such a long time because everyone told me like, oh, well, you can be this, or don't talk about your sexuality, or you have to be like 24 forever in order for people to care. Or you have to this, or this is what's relevant. So like, you need like trap drums in your song, or do you know what I mean? It's like, it's so fucked up. And the thing is, like, as an artist, you obviously like have something you want to say and you want to be able to share that with people. And when people come in, you want to believe that they understand you and they know what's best. But we're also very malleable and we bend because we want to be seen and we want to share and we want to believe. And it's really easy to lose yourself and to become inauthentic. And that's why even people like, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Britney Spears, all these people who've achieved gigantic success have had very public nervous breakdowns because they're being rewarded for something that they aren't, right? And like, I remember Katy Perry did like a live stream thing for her, not the last record, where she talked to her therapist and she's like, I cut my hair because like, I don't want to be Katy Perry. Like Katy Perry's strong and this, and Catherine Hudson's like, doesn't get seen and is like weak and vulnerable. And like, that's what happens if you do get, like, when people are jealous of the level of success people have, they're not enjoying it. Right? And then when people try to do things that they want to, like, it's not received well because they have to be that like caricature of people who people think they are. So it's better off. And I really am so grateful that I did all of this work on myself. And that's like the biggest takeaway, I think, is that all you have is you and your story, your perspective, and the way that you hear things. You cannot be anything else other than that. So don't even try, right? Just put yourself out there as you are. It will connect with people. Won't connect with other people. And like, you can't control anything else.
What do you think is like there's this, trying to figure out how to phrase this really I mean, I think you've just made such a good point there. There's this thing with making music or making art where it's like we still know we have an audience. So like, do you have any gut feeling about how you combine being authentically yourself with ensuring that something that's coming out of the speakers kind of does the best job of like reaching out and grabbing people?
Yeah, I had somebody, someone pulled me aside before actually all of these songs and said to me, I didn't understand how special you were until I met you. I heard your music. I think you're talented. You have a very recognizable voice. But in meeting you, I see something that I didn't hear, right? She's like, I feel like I hear you trying to be universal. And she's like, and I have a feeling the more intimate and vulnerable you are and personal, actually the more universal it's going to be. Right? And it was the best advice. And I wrote all these songs and felt like a little uncomfortable, to be honest, because nothing, I grew up in like the Kurt Cobain like school of songwriting. Like you say something intimate and then you have to say something ironic or like funny, so it's like there's still like a wall from what people are hearing and who you actually are. And with this, like, I wrote a song about like the physical abuse that I suffered growing up, and about there's another song called The Heaviness that's about like my struggle with like mental health and just feeling like suffocated constantly. And it just kind of goes through different things that I've dealt with in my life. And Modern Love is like probably the most universal theme, but it's a theme that I wrote about and we can all relate to it. But it's a theme that I wrote about because I was like, how is it that we are more connected than ever and we all feel more alone than ever and feel like we don't have anybody that we could even like talk to or reach out to? And then when you are physically in a room with someone, they like don't even look you in your face. Right. And like, it's such a fucked up thing that like we're all accepting, and it's really not good for anybody's like mental health. Right. And so I sat, and that's what this was about. And before all of this happened, because it's all about isolation, like personal isolation and stuff, and just the irony of like what we're dealing with now and the timing of the song, I think like why people are like sharing it and connecting it, and hopefully continue to do so. But that answer the question?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're essentially saying like by being more vulnerable and more real, it's more. It actually has more hooks in it.
Yes,
because you're not trying to like project some like vanilla thing of what you think everyone's after. I mean, I think I always find a thing like just running a little side tangent for me as a producer. It's always trying to like follow like the arc of a song or the arc of a mix or the dynamics of something, and like how all the kind of mechanics of refreshing emotion and attention and keeping people engaged. Yeah. But I was actually on a call with an artist about potentially working with them yesterday, and it's like, but there's always the songs where it's like, I think you're saying something here, and I want to know more, but I don't understand it. And until I can really understand it, we need to like keep working through this. And it seems to be that those are the songs where it feels like there's really something that's being said that doesn't have to always necessarily be spelled out ridiculously literally. Those tend to be like the special ones on the albums that people come back to, or kind of like, to use a kind of terrible metaphor, it's like the tentpole songs are the ones that really kind of connect because there is a degree of vulnerability that's actually very rarely found out there.
Definitely. The thing that was interesting with this project is I was always like, I have to tell my story just through my songs. And actually I realized like vulnerability is so empowering for so many people. And my life has been so insane. Like even just my music career has been so insane, but like my actual life also, and things I went throughout my childhood and all of my like developmental years. And I did this podcast for To Be Magnetic and talked for almost 2 hours. Kind of didn't think anyone was going to listen to it, to be honest, because it was so long. And I got like 700 new followers within like 48 hours. Whoa. And all these messages from people like, oh my God, I was going to do the work, but I've been too like insecure and uncomfortable in hearing your story. Like now I'm going to do this. Or I started doing art again because of you. And it's just like, your story and your path is so important to people. And as a musician, it's so important to speak it and to put it into your music, because like it's what people need. People need authenticity, and people need to hear that everybody is dealing with the things that they're dealing with. We only see, like in music especially, we usually get like the best version of someone and the worst version of someone. You never, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm like indie and like emotional, so like everything's going to be dark and negative and this, and like then you have like Happy by Pharrell, and then there's this huge divide. But we're all living in that divide, and it's very rarely represented in music, the actual process of living, right? But yeah, and my microphone is a Sound Deluxe 251, and it's amazing.
I think that last kind of 10 seconds sums up kind of the reality of making things in the modern era, doesn't it? It's like you have to be able to think about like really, really in-depth kind of like psychological and emotional things and how to communicate them, and then marry that up with a model number of something
Yeah.
you know what I mean, to get it out into the world.
Yeah.
And I find, that kind of dichotomy between like expression and technique is kind of wild. Let's start loading up the chat with any questions for Atarah. I mean, I know that some of the folks on here, I actually specifically said, like, come back and let's talk to Atarah about this. So actually, Stone Art Live, who's our friend Matt over in Cape Cod. Matt, do you mind if I mention to people that you've been, like, the game you're building, anyway, Matt's working on these, like, really massive long-term projects. But saying the self-promotion struggle is definitely exhausting, but going through multiple sources. Matt, do you mean like just going through trying to figure out multiple channels and having like different identities? He's also saying better to put in the extra work than have any regrets, especially on a bigger project. I mean, I think that's an interesting question as well, Atarah, just coming back to like how you've turned a huge body of work into like a very focused section of songs. And actually, I wanted to ask, like you said, the album in its entirety tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
Did that kind of emerge as an overall concept, or did you start to see the thread that was being linked through a bunch of the songs that arrived with you and realize there was a kind of something being encoded in the broader collection?
Well, I'd written these songs throughout this process on like this journey that I had personally starting 2 years ago. So it's literally, in addition to, I don't know how familiar everyone is with like inner child work, shadow work, like neuroplasticity work, where it's all about reprogramming and going back and accessing like traumatic memories and taking ownership over like aspects of yourself you rejected because you were made fun of over them, or, you know, and just like really like owning all parts of yourself, positive and negative, like there's not really good or bad. And in addition to doing that work, like I put all of those feelings directly into what I was writing about. And then as money became an issue, I'm like, oh, it's going to be an EP. I'm just going to do like this section of songs. But as time keeps going on, I'm like, it should just be my record, which is called The Darkness, the Light. And it's going to be just the story of like starting in this really bad place and where I ended up. And in addition to that, like I partnered with this organization called Happy the Movement that I'm becoming more involved with as time goes on. But initially, they are offering through my affiliate link, anyone who needs someone to talk to, a free 30-minute session. And they're not, it's not with a therapist, it's just with like other people who like want to support people so people don't feel alone, because like that was such a huge part of my life, is feeling alone and feeling like I had nowhere to turn. And yeah, and this is kind of about breaking that cycle and like reclaiming the aspects of yourself that you were embarrassed of and trying to hide, and like how your life can turn around.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, you were mentioning earlier as well, like you kind of came up when it was, or through like the Kurt Cobain School of Songwriting. And there's, I think it's really interesting what you're saying there about Darkness and the Light. The whole album is like that journey and that voyage. Like, you know, there's this kind of like cliche out in the world of like, to make art, you have to be suffering, or you have to be like angsty to be an artist or to create. What's your point of view on that trope?
I think it's bullshit. I think like the thing is like, what I think art can be created from any strong feeling, right? Because if you don't have a strong feeling about something, like you're not going to want to create something around it. The truth in that statement that I found, and it's relative in a bunch of different ways, is that most people who are artists experience some kind of rejection or doubt around their art, right? Like people who are real storytellers. And that could be, even if someone's, you know, dad's like the most famous actor on the face of the earth, they're growing up in the shadow of that, right? And their idea of who they think they have to be seen is very overwhelming, right? And there's a pressure that comes along with that. And then there's someone who, like me, who grew up, you know, in New Jersey and then in like a trailer on a Marine base in North Carolina, who like had no idea, like, you know, no one in my family even went to college until I did, you know? So I think there's definitely, and I'm not saying every musician, because I think there's some people who are just like, I want to be famous and, go on TikTok and whatever. And then someone writes songs for them and they have a career. But I mean, people who are real artists, I do think have navigated their way through something and feel like they have something to share with other people that's important.
Nicely said.
Right. I
Yeah.
don't think that means you have to be depressed. And
Yeah.
but I do think it's something that people who do come from money feel guilty that they're not struggling and they're an artist in like financially. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
yeah.
like, it's all such a thing because like we've all received so much programming around like what things look like and what you have to be those things.
Yeah.
And nothing's true across the board for anybody. We all have our individual paths and purposes and feelings.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's. I mean, I found it really interesting having been based in the UK for a long time, and then being based in America. Just that, I mean, it's not universally true for everyone, but in a way, in the UK, there's, I think, coming out of a classroom, there is such a cultural thing that especially that you're just, everything's supposed to be an accident. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And you're not supposed to have like thought about how you want things to unfold. It's kind of like, well, I was just, everything just kind of happened for the hell of it, not because you wanted it. Especially in like, indie music and that kind of thing. And then, well,
because it's not cool in like indie music to make an effort or to like care,
yeah, totally.
right? And that's what I'm saying with like programming. Like if you're indie, like I don't care, I'm too cool for this, and like that's stupid. But inside, like if they got put on Pitchfork, they'd be like doing fucking cartwheels.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know. I find that kind of dichotomy fascinating, and then you see like the hip hop world where it's like, I am really successful. Do you know what I mean? It's like the kind of message is in so many songs there as well, and I don't know. I mean, I just think I've also seen like so many people who, when they make themselves miserable, it's like it kind of chokes their ability to create and actually chokes their ability to express themselves as cleanly. So, I mean, it sounds in a way like a lot of the work you did kind of like, even when you're in like really dark and difficult situations, it kind of almost created the breathing room in a way for you to be able to express yourself more clearly, and almost like took the pressure off by shaking things up in a way.
Because I think that's the thing is, it's so easy to become 100% immersed in what you're doing as an artist, but it's not healthy, And I think that's the thing with like having boundaries and having balance is so important. And I didn't have that for the majority of my life. And that's why I struggled with depression and just all of these things and just didn't feel good enough, because like I was trying to control something that is like based on nothing. Right? Just because I wanted it. And it's funny because with this, I've never been so relaxed about like making, releasing music, anything like that. And I'm being so supported. And every day something new happens. Like, even like my friend Victoria like is hosting a thing for like a dog rescue called Mutt Scouts. And she posts a thing and like Tovlo's popping on,
Right.
Because like she happened to be like fostering a dog for Mutt Scout. So it's like, maybe a bunch of Tovlo people are going to come on. I'm performing a song. With this, it's like if 2 people from this go and download my song or follow me on Spotify, like that's a surprise and a success to me. Right? Because like you don't know where things are going to come from and who knows who and how things work. And when you're open to being surprised, instead of trying to control everything, you're just so much more productive and you're so much happier in what you're doing. And you allow the space to be like, it's okay for me to not write a song today. It's okay for me to put this mix back. You know what I mean? And like, there's no guilt associated with it,
Love it. That's great. We have a quick question from Zach, or a quick statement saying, my fiance gave me this little journal called the 5-Minute Journal. It's based on positive psychology, where every morning and night you write something you're grateful for and amazing things that happened today. Just thought I'd share it because one of the best gifts I've ever had. It really changed the way I think for the better. It's funny, I have something similar. A friend of mine in the UK, John O'Pattinson, recommended a thing called the Best Self Diary. And I've noticed it's like in a three month kind of chunk. And any time I've been using it actively has tended to be when like really interesting things start happening. So, I mean, it's kind of fascinating in a way, isn't it? Like, you've touched on neuroplasticity a few times. Yeah. But I think that whole world and like really understanding our brains and the
our brains and
changeability of our
also,
brains.
yeah, and energetics and like knowing like the thing that's really interesting because there's a lot like I've studied like Joe Dispenza a lot. I've studied Marissa Peer, but to be magnetic for me is the one I found the most applicable and life-changing. And it's the whole idea that like we manifest from our subconscious. So if you actually in your subconscious don't believe that you can receive something, you won't, right? And so you do all of this unblocking work around that and you set your intentions and then you find expanders, right? So that you can see it to
What's an
believe it.
expander?
So these are all phrases that she's coined
Right.
within her process. But basically the idea behind it is that just thinking positive doesn't do anything. Right? Like you could think positive all you want. Like The Secret, like if you have never seen success as an artist, like, right, let's say like your parents, you know, both work at Walmart and you want to be this artist and live in a house in Malibu and this, you could visualize that like all you want. But if you don't actually believe it's possible, like you're not going to be able to make it happen. So the idea in her process is that you find expanders, in addition to do the unblocking work to realize like what it actually is that you want. An expander is a person who has parts of what you're looking for that you can connect with in an honest way to see yourself in the situation. So it's almost like people who, like Bowie was a big one for me. I was never a David Bowie fan. Like minus like singles, but like I didn't own a record or, which is like surprising when I say that to people. But a friend of mine was like, oh, go to this exhibit. And I was like, you know, like I'm not really like a Bowie person like that. And she's like, just go. Okay. And she bought me a ticket and I went with my goddaughter and I walked through and I got to the end and she was like, and I was like, it kind of in shock. And she's like, what did that do for you? And I said to her, like, that's how I process things in my career. Like going through, seeing the way he like, just the way he wrote songs, lyrics, his motivation behind things, stage plots, costumes, like, and I saw myself through that lens. And I was like, oh, those are like my qualities. And like, so it's like finding people that are expanding your idea of what you can have, right? And it's like completely life-changing when you find those things.
So
and
it's like, so you're really able to kind of see how something applies to you and imagine yourself like really doing something, not just like an abstract concept of like
not just like
or something like that.
Yeah, watching someone on a beach, you know, looking at a picture of someone like looking at a sunset on the beach and like a happy relationship. Like you actually like find people who have a similar background, similar interests. Maybe they came from a similar like financial background or dealt with the same hardships, and you kind of connect with them in a real way, and then it reflects back to you and makes your subconscious realize that like, oh, that's me. Right?
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Do we have any other questions in the chat at the moment? Oh, someone has actually said, how do you feel about TikTok? By Alex Alexander. Oh, and actually, that's really nice. See that one on there? Chelsea Rose Brown, sorry, Chelsea, saying you're a huge expander for me in music, your career, production, so many things. I'm a Pathway member. I had to get on Twitch to join in.
So Pathway member, that's through To Be Magnetic.
Okay.
Also, that's all the stuff that I'm talking about. And cool. Thank you. That's amazing.
And I mean, Chelsea, are there like specific kind of changes or experiences or like revelations you've had that you could share in the chat in terms of your journey? I'm kind of really, this is really why I just feel like I wanted to talk to Atarah, is just seeing the way he's kind of changed and shifted and grown. Yet, I mean, for me, when I hang out with you, I feel like you're absolutely the same person that I've always known. But it's just seeing how, and also like actually something Atarah was saying right at the very, very beginning of our chat is that you've been on such a long journey with all this, but the fact is you're still not just still making music, but you're now kind of properly opening the door by releasing your stuff independently. And, you know, you've transcended those kind of like time-bound pressures and gone way past the point where a lot of other people would have thrown in the towel, thank goodness. So Chelsea's just saying, okay, so many, like Atarah was saying, I just never believed in myself. I always looked to validation from others throughout my whole career. Yeah, I know. I feel like I can really relate to that as well. I was very lucky to have, worked with a few big name artists, which provides a lot of like external validation. But it's still like a big challenge to be in a situation where you're not under that umbrella. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Or you start wondering if like a particular situation you're in was just like a little bit luck based, or also if you're in like a really good situation, there's a fear about stepping out of line or like keeping yourself in a box.
Yeah.
So that you don't offend people or don't ruffle skirts or like maintain the status quo. Audio Dabbler, who's mentioned Atlanta, saying this being a very inspiring chat. It felt like Atarah was reading my book on a few points with self-worth. That's really cool.
That's awesome, because like that's what I'm saying, like why conversations like this are so important, and also in sharing through your art, because like that's just my life. Like, it's just the life that I've lived, and like I'm not embarrassed by any part of it. And it's like there's so many people who can then, it's just, you can't lose if you're just doing you and being yourself and being transparent and putting that out there. It's not about like, oh, what if someone takes advantage of me or this and this and this. When you actually get aligned with yourself, you don't care about that stuff, right? Because like there's so many positive aspects that come from just being open and being honest, and people really appreciate it. And it makes them like find a place within themselves that like maybe they felt shame around, and they're like, you know what, like I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, I don't care,
I think there's something really interesting you're saying there about being worried about being taken advantage of, because I think, like you're saying, if you're really in tune with yourself, your own internal barometer will kind of like detect situations that aren't right for you.
Right. Versus people get taken advantage of when, like, speaking again for myself and like a lot of people, the only way I was ever seen was when I was perfect, when I was helpful to everybody. I was everybody's best friend, everybody's therapist, the person who would help you paint your apartment, the person who would help you move, the person, like anything anyone needed, I was there for, right? And it was filling a hole in me. And then if something happened and the person made me feel like shit, I would find more external stuff to do to help other people to make myself feel better, right? So in turn, like, I was coming from this weird place of lack. But the relationship, like, I was giving so much and this person like was giving the bare minimum. I still got a lot out of it because it made me feel good, even though it was like destructive in a weird way. But like, when you do this kind of work and you center yourself, like, I would never do that again. Like now, for me, it was like, it's how I've survived. And I didn't realize it was a problem until I started doing this. And I'm like, wow, I felt bad for so much of my life. Right. And it's the same thing with like, whether it was a manager or an A&R or whatever else, because like, I wanted them to see me and I wanted them to like me and to believe in me. And like, it's not about anybody else. Like, you have to be all of those things for yourself, because you can't control someone's reaction to you, whether you're just trying to like be overly available or what. Like, you have to do things because you really believe in them and because you really want to do them. And you can't fail when you do that.
How do you balance, I wouldn't go as far as saying this is a devil's advocate question, but it's like a very practical question of like, how would you feel that you would balance or understand the difference between really being true to yourself against having blind spots in yourself that might be preventing you from making the most of a situation or making wiser choices?
The thing is, I think that was how I lived most of my life. So I'm very aware of that behavior now. Mm-hmm. And now I'm kind of at the point, I'm so self-aware that I don't even get really excited or really disappointed anymore. Like, for me, if I have any kind of like strong feeling, like where I'm like, oh, this is the thing, it's going to change my life. Or, right, or like, oh my God, this didn't happen. Like, I'm a loser, I suck. Like, anything like that. Mm-hmm. I know that it has nothing to do with the situation and it has to do with a lack in me.
Right.
Right. because there's a part in me that's still looking to be fulfilled by something external. Therefore, I'm on the ride and going like this. So when I feel like that, like nobody should feel that excited, in my opinion. And nobody should feel that disappointed in anything. We're here to experience life and like navigate through it. And like, whether it's a positive or a negative situation, there's something for you to learn. And if things feel very extreme, it doesn't feel good. Even if it's the best news, if your reaction is so elevated, it's rooted to some kind of lack in you. Okay. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel like that. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So anytime that I feel like that now, I know I have to take that feeling and use it as my map to navigate to find out where the insecurity is, where it came from, and then like make actionable steps to like do work around like being present, not living in the future, not living in the past, all the things that we do to like distract ourselves, you know?
Amazing. So you've really developed a sensitivity of being able to reflect on your own state and understand if that's like an additional layer that's being added onto a situation instead of objectively what's happening in a place.
For sure.
And in a way, you're almost like obscuring what you need to know about yourself by your own reaction, so to speak.
100%.
Right. Because there was something you said quite a bit earlier, Atarah, that I think was really, really, really interesting. And I might almost say would be like the pivotal moment in your life, which was you were just talking about these situations that kept repeating with all these different people. And you had the kind of wisdom to say, well, I need to understand what it is with all these different variables that keep pointing to the same result. And what can you change internally to start getting a different result? I mean, I think that's profoundly insightful.
Definitely.
And most people don't go through life really making that or having that realization.
Well, it's easier to blame other people, right? But I mean, you know, that's the truth behind it. But you know what? It's easier. But at the end, you still like bear that cross because you carry around the shame and the rejection and like the bad feelings because you're a victim when you live your life like that. Like I spent so much of my life being a victim and like I just don't have time for it anymore. Like I got to a point I was like crying on my floor every single day for like 4 hours and I was like literally, right? Like multiple like suicide attempts later and all of this stuff. Like I just couldn't get out of my own way. And I didn't want to take any responsibility for my life because like a lot of really shitty things happened to me, right? But like I didn't want to be like another statistic. I didn't want to become like the typical like drug addict, alcoholic, this and this, or the person who kills themselves because they didn't deal with their life. Because like this is my life. It's the only one I've known and I can do something with it or I can choose not to. And I just one day was laying on the ground and I was like, you know what? Like I'm tired of crying in such an unproductive way. Like I'm going to take all of this fucking pain and I'm going to do something with it. And I wrote these songs, I started doing this work and I let all of that emotion come out of me. And like anytime I felt an insecurity or anything, I shared it on my social media, which also made other people do the same and feel open to that in their lives because like it wasn't working the other way, you know?
And that's in terms of like the other way of like trying to project an image or trying to think like you're supposed to be this kind of like character.
Yeah, project an image based on insecurity, right? Like what I thought I had to be in order for people to care about me or in order for people to want to be my friend or to want to be my manager or to sign me or, you know, and then it's like, I can't sustain that because it's not me. I don't know how to sustain it. So then you get lost in it and then you feel like a failure again. But the reality is like, you already failed because you're trying to be somebody that you're not.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. I love that. Let's have a quick little check through. We've had a couple of questions and stuff come in. Zach will come back. Zach saying between the composition phase and the final mixing phase, you take a break for a while. Let's come back to that one. I want to keep following this thread. So, so Yanni is actually asking, I'm wondering if you practice meditation or mindfulness, and if so, can you talk about what approaches you focus on?
Yeah, so I do every morning. And listen, people, like I've only lived in California for not even a year yet. So this isn't just because I became like woo-woo and moved to the West Coast. But I do lots of different work. Every morning I do a mindfulness meditation. And every night Specifically, there's a morning and night meditation by Joe Dispenza that kind of like sets your intentions throughout the day. I do that, and you kind of go through, and you basically visualize space within your body and space outside of your body, and the whole idea is to let go of the physicality of your body and just connect to like energy that's around you. And then from there, you visualize the situations that you're trying to make happen, right? And you go through your day, things you have to do, things that you can take off of your plate. And then you kind of tie it all up with like an elevated feeling. And that's like usually like a feeling of gratitude for the things that are coming and the things that you have already. And I start my morning like that every day. And then every night I close my eyes and I do the same thing. And I go over my day and like what I set my intentions to be without judgment, not like, oh, you fucked this up, or you said you were going to have a margarita and you had 3, which happens a lot. And just like, yeah, and being like, okay, I did this today. I feel really proud. And I kind of cycle in my head. This is where I fell short. Tomorrow I'm going to work on this and setting a boundary around this. And then I just like wind down and I go to sleep. I do like a to be magnetic, something or other in some form multiple times a week, depending if I have like a trigger or like right now I'm starting Up Level, which is about just like a phase of transition where you went from one place and you're going to your next place. Yeah, I think just mindfulness, being present. Like I practice mindfulness in every single second of my day. If I pick up my phone, I'm picking up my phone because I'm intending to pick up my phone. Anything that I do at this point in my life, I'm aware of. Like and that's like another Joe Dispenza thing, like wake up, have your morning routine be different because your body starts living for you and like your like unconscious mind will start making decisions. That's why people can get up with their eyes closed, walk to the bathroom, put their coffee pot on, do their thing because it becomes so routine that you're not present in your life. You're just on autopilot, right? So like every morning I wake up, I do something a little different. Sometimes I run downstairs, I let my dog out first. Sometimes I wake up and I jump up and down, like to like for lymphatic drainage. Like, you know, I have like a series of things and I cycle them to just make sure that like I'm always awake and alert in my life.
So you're being intentional from like the very first thing you do.
And all day.
Right. I love that. I love that.
Because like when you're not, what are you going to do? Like stress out about what you're waiting for that may or may not come, or like this decision that you made that like wasn't a good decision. It's like that doesn't benefit anybody.
Is there that Joseph Dispenza thing? I'm actually interested to try that one. Is there a specific name of that practice or meditation?
Yeah, it's called. They actually have it on iTunes, and it's just the morning and evening meditation.
Lovely.
Yeah, and it's really. There are a few I can send in like book recommendation and stuff too. He has another one that's really interesting that I do sometimes. It's like an hour, and you basically force feelings into your body, right? Like we force so much negative and force and reinforce so much negativity and doubt constantly, like, oh, this, or oh, I'm this, or I ate too much, or I have no self-control, or I'm a loser, or I'm ugly, or right? It's like those are the kind of thoughts that predominantly go through most of our brains. Like very rarely are we sitting and being like, I'm fucking amazing. Yeah, like this is so good. Like, wow, like I have the best taste, or like we don't do that. Like most of our thoughts are based in self-doubt. So the idea is like, again, with neuroplasticity is creating new neurons and new neural pathways that will become stronger and be the things that you connect with and not the ones that are based in shame. But it takes a lot of repetition and commitment and consistency because you're working against like a lifetime of programming, right?
Totally.
So you just have to, it's like a lifestyle change and you just have to commit to doing it. But this meditation, you sit and he does a breathing exercise to bring you in, and then he will be like, what does power feel like? And you're in your head, and then you kind of translate what that feeling is throughout your body. What does it feel like to be great? What does it feel like to be happy? What does joy feel like? What does freedom feel like? And you go through all of these really elevated emotions, and you just get like this huge rush And like anytime I can't shake a feeling, I do that because I know it's like kind of pushing against it, right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's almost going back to like your ability to kind of like shake the snow globe or something like that and never let things kind of settle and ferment in a negative way.
totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Stone Art Live, Matt is just saying, actually made an interesting point. Self-criticism and critique is beneficial, but to not be hard on yourself, but to be honest. I mean, that's, we were talking about that a little bit before, Tara, where you're saying like you can recognize those signs where you're kind of getting carried away, or you're not being true to yourself. Do you have any like kind of objective ways of critiquing yourself in terms of like planning, but in a positive way of like seeing, I think you mentioned very briefly about like the end of your day if something didn't go as planned. It's like, how do you address that for the next day? But do you have any kind of like specific processes of reflection that you apply? Or do you feel like,
I mean, I'm constantly reflecting. I think the thing is, I I just work really hard to not make myself feel bad about anything I'm doing, any decision that I'm making, because like I just tired of that, you know? So like if I sit every morning, like I don't, minus things that like I have to do or I commit to, like I put those in my calendar, but I have a written calendar because I'd like to not be on my phone. I like to like sit and be present when I'm writing, and I like to also see my day. So every morning I'll sit at some point and I'll make like a little nice box that I could fill in when I accomplish the task, and I'll just write the things that I want to do. And then as I get through my day, if I'm like, you know what, like I don't have the bandwidth for this, like I just cross it off and I'll do it another day. But like I try not to like put judgment on myself or make myself feel bad, because like
you've mentioned
I have to live
shame a few times as being like a really destructive emotion.
yeah.
Was there and I thought it was interesting that you use that specific word. And I mean, I'm sure we all know the whole kind of thing about like how humans evolved across hundreds of thousands of years as social animals. It's like shame is also like the most terrifying thing, because it can be equated with being thrown out of your tribal group, where you'll get kind of eaten by hyenas and die. So it's literally kind of like a life or death emotion. But being able to like recognize and transcend and release shame, especially in like a creative context, was there kind of anything you specifically recognized around shame specifically, or is it just an overall feeling of like negative emotions, and that's just one you kind of mentioned in passing?
The thing is, like with shame, is that it's not yours. Like we don't, children, when you see like a 1.5-year-old kid, they're not ashamed of anything. They want that toy, they grab it. They want to not put clothes on, they run around the house naked, right? Shame is something that's put on you by other people, right? And a lot of us, because we want to fit in and don't want to be criticized, we put way too much energy and attention on it, and then we stuff it, and then we think it's this part of us that people see that we try desperately to hide because someone rejected it at some point, right? But it's not real. Like the shame that we're put on us is because you're doing something that's making someone feel insecure also, so they put it back on you so that you have to own it and not them, right? So like shame's not, it's not really a self-imposed thing. It's something that's external that we then like swallow and take ownership over.
Right. That's
you know
wild.
what I mean?
Yeah. I love that.
Does that make sense?
No, it's a really, I mean, it's absolutely true, but just such a great way to frame it, of understanding. So in effect, you're kind of saying it's really about how other people react to you, and why the hell should your own life be limited by other people's reactions, which are based on their own particular set of filters and.
Yep, 100%. And you know what? Like, those just aren't your people. And like that's what and that's okay. And like that's one thing I noticed with like my friendships, even before I started doing all of this, is that I really always lean toward authenticity with people. Like whether someone's the loudest person or like the biggest fucking asshole, if who they really are is the biggest fucking asshole and they own it, I'm 100% here for it. Like I have no problem sitting at a table with someone like screaming at the top of their lungs in like a 5-star restaurant. Like if that's who they are, like, and I'm not going to make them feel bad about that. Like if that's embarrassing to people, they don't have to come to dinner. Like, do you know what I mean? But like, I'm not going to force my insecurities on someone else to make them feel bad. Like when people insult people's laughs, for example, I think that's like the worst thing you could do to someone, because that's their physical reaction to like joy and happiness.
Yeah.
And then you're making them feel bad about the way that it sounds. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's really fucked up.
That's great. Yeah. But I mean, it's also fundamentally such a good thing to remember in terms of, you know, one of the central themes of our chat, which is being an independent creator who's putting yourself out there in the world. So just like really having those tools and that awareness and that intentionality when you're releasing stuff. I'm sure, like, have you noticed a difference between like pre all this work and this point now in terms of how you're actually making work and when you're creating stuff? Like, you know, often people will be writing something or producing something and there's a voice in our head going like, this is going to be a hit, or this has a potential to be like the heaviest bass ever, or this has, you know, when you kind of start thinking during the process of creation about how things are going to be received. I mean, I'm imagining, if I can project onto you for a second, that's kind of the last thing on your mind at this point in time now when you're writing.
Yeah, I'm kind of, to be honest, and this sounds crazy, but I actually don't care how things are going to be received. Because, and not saying I don't want people to listen to my music, I have complete faith that it's going to connect with the people that need to connect with it. And to be honest, I don't care how many people that is, right? Like even today, like seeing like 3 people were moved and connected with like one thing that we talked about, that's a success to me, right? And like I have no more control over anything than that, right? And I think part of the thing when people say, even some of the most successful people, like you hear people like Madonna be like, oh, well, if you're going to be in this industry, you better have a thick skin, right? I don't actually think that's true, because to me, that's stating that you're very vulnerable and like fragile on the inside. So you need to have this outward layer of protection, right? To maintain that. I actually think you need to be connected to what you're doing and who you are and have complete belief in it, because then you don't care about criticism. You just know like, okay, that person doesn't like it. That's fine. Do you know how many blogs and playlists and things I submitted to for this song? And they're like, this is too alternative for a playlist. This is too pop for a playlist. Oh, your mix is too clean. Oh, your mix is too dirty. Oh, it's like, am I going to cry every time it says like on Submit Hub I was denied a submission? No, like those aren't my people. And like there are ones that are picking it up. Do you know what I mean? It's just like I can't control that. Like what am I going to do? Take that and be like, oh, I suck because you know what I mean? It's just like that's not productive.
Totally.
But I'm not going to stop sharing it.
Yeah, great. Let's double back to that question. Oh, actually, just before we jump off that one, Audio Dabbler was just saying, trying to figure out how to get out of his own way. And Chelsea just suggested to literally just go check out To Be Magnetic or the Expanded podcast. So,
100%.
Yeah, so like actionable steps, like things you can actually like do right now after we've had this chat is like go and click on that, check it out. I mean, great. So Monocog Zach up in Calgary is just saying, between the composition phase and the final mixing phase, do you take a break for a while from music or go straight into mixing?
Depends on how I'm feeling. It's funny because I used to have a friend who was a mixer and was so precious about everything. Like, and I used to judge it because he'd be like, oh, I can't mix now because we ate. Like, I have to wait 30 minutes because it like affects your hearing. And, oh, we can't do this because we this, or we can't. And he would make up all these things. And like, there is truth in all of those things, obviously, but he used it as a way to like paralyze himself. Right. So like, I do, like I sit in the room quietly, for like 20 minutes before I even open my laptop. Sometimes I'll put like a little background music just to like reacclimate into my environment. I won't go right from doing something into a mix because I want to do it before my ears are exhausted. Because then I make bad decisions. But I kind of do things whenever, like, to be honest, like with Modern Love, like sometimes like when I after I did the reductive EQ, when I did my initial like levels, I did them through my laptop speakers because I know so many people listen like that and listen through their iPhone speaker and things. So like I wanted to make sure the things that were having impact were like coming through in that smallest form. And then I knew like when I put them on my studio speakers, there was going to be like a bass issue or something else that would need to be dealt with. But I don't put pressure on anything, and I don't approach anything the same way. Like sometimes I only want to mix, sometimes I just want to write songs, sometimes I want to produce. Like currently I'm in like mixing mode. I just think like whatever you're doing to be productive, don't let it become another thing that you use to make yourself feel bad.
Perfect.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
like, because everything's different.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of putting it. And maybe, I mean, unless we have any other questions, that might be a good point to wrap up. What have you got on today, Atarah?
Well, I've on clothes. That's only the third time that's happened in the past 2 months.
So you bought clothes?
No, I have clothes on.
Oh, you
I
wore
got dressed. Yeah.
Amazing.
Just a little work.
Yeah, cool. Actually, Zach, who asked that same question, is just asking, do you give yourself a cutoff time when you feel that you're overworking something in both composition and mixing?
I do everything by feeling. If I'm bored, I stop.
Yeah.
If I'm losing motivation, I stop, because I think like when and this just works for me, like I can't attest for it's going to work for everybody, but if I'm, I guess like kind of on a bigger scale, I started making music because I felt like I had a point to make that was valuable and that needed to be shared. And I felt very emotionally connected to it. That's the first thing that goes when you start listening to the noise around you, is that initial intention and reason behind making music. And then it starts becoming about other people and what people expect of you and what they want, whether that's your fans, your management, your label, right? And I kind of lost the point for such a long time and started chasing trends and all this stuff like this. And so now I'm just very patient with myself, and I only do things when they feel good. If I can't figure out like the fucking EQ on a kick and like I swap it out for 2 kicks and none of them are working and that's where my head is, I save my session, I close it, and I step away. And sometimes like I get clarity and I come back and I open it that day, and sometimes I don't look at it for 2 days. Like I wait to have that feeling where I actually like want to do it. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And I don't put pressure on myself, because why?
Yeah, I think
nobody's out there like banging down my door waiting for this stuff. You know?
But this is a really important point. Like I've kind of talked a few times, like on stream when I've been mixing, kind of answering questions around this, which is that having a really good sense of when, like I kind of tend to say like the speakers are telling me something. It's like when the track is telling you what it wants, then do those things, and you'll kind of like build up a little list, and some of them might be a little bit trickier and you might be almost procrastinating on them. But if that list is empty, don't sit there tweaking something for the hell of it.
For sure.
Yeah, and I mean certainly when I was mixing nearly full time, I went from taking kind of like, it's nearly take me 2 days a song, day and a half, 2 days a song averaged out. And I just realized that a lot of things when you're mixing, and this also now applies to production, or I guess anything creative, is like this feeling of you're having to do stuff to make it kind of legitimate. It's like you have to work hard on something for it to achieve a certain status. And that's kind of bullshit. Or you also have to like allow for the fact that you might get really good at something, and something that used to take you 2 days takes you like 4 hours now or something like that. But fundamentally, if you're not sure what to do, that's a good indication either that it's done, literally like it's done, or to just not sit there changing stuff for the hell of it.
For sure. Yeah. Like I think like when I stop is when I'm not making anything better or worse. I'm just like changing things for the sake of changing things. Like I've played it in my car, I've played it on my studio speakers, I've played it through my phone speaker, my laptop speakers, my Bluetooth speaker. And like, I'm like, oh, I could make this a little brighter. Yeah. But then I have to make this brighter, or maybe it's like, then I'm just like, oh no, it's done.
Totally, yeah. It's like if it's a shrug emoji, like, because you can change things forever. But I think if there's that fundamental, if the communication is there, then that's the other big secret about mixing. It really doesn't matter if your like low end is maxed out to like the last 0.25 of a dB.
No, and the thing is, I like, to be honest, like I think it was like Spike Stent like said like that he never looks at the faders. Right. And I think there is something in that. Like if you over if and I think just in songwriting, being an artist, social media, being a human being, being a good friend, being a mixer, once you start over intellectualizing things, you've already lost the point, right? It's like the best moments happen in all of those areas when you're inspired, and it's just like this like aha thing, like, ooh, like that's a cool thing. That will probably be your favorite part of the production.
Yeah.
Like this thing that just like came to you that you did, and you're like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
and that's what I look for as much as possible
Yeah.
when I'm working. And when I don't feel it, I don't work.
Yeah. And I mean, actually, just like because, you know, most of my work is like for artists or for clients. So I'm kind of like quite regularly in that dialogue. I did like consciously choose a few years ago to literally just like not spend that extra half day tweaking details. Because it was stuff that I thought mattered. And I would instead send stuff to people when it was at a point where I felt like I was still really fresh and excited about it, if that makes sense, or I like knew it was telling a story, and then I just be like, right, send it. And
Yeah.
rather than like, well, now I'm going to come back and, you know, dive in again and again and again. And it was kind of amazing. Often as well, stuff where I was like, I don't know if this sounds any good, but I'd send it off. And then like, you know, you start getting positive feedback. You're like, this is perfect, you know?
Yeah, and when you get that motivates you to keep going versus like I think sometimes like when I do work on tracks for other people, because I'm so sensitive from the artist perspective and understanding how important this is for people, I'm a little too generous with the amount of time I let to go by, to the point that sometimes it's hard for me to jump back in because I'll let someone sit with something to the point that when it comes back, it's like it starts feeling like work for me to have to open it. Right. And I think like it's just important to like really strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. Hey, we hope you enjoyed that video. A couple of more links here for some talks we think you'll like. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and otherwise head over to completeproducer.net so that you can connect with other music making geniuses from all over the world. We'll see you there.